Welcome to EV Hub Live, a live video podcast for professionals advancing transportation electrification. To find out more about the show, visit atlasevhub.com/live. Hosting capacity maps are an essential tool for EV charging developers and utilities alike. They can enable developers to make informed decisions about whether and where to pursue EV charging projects, reducing the cost of infrastructure rollout and significantly shortening project timelines. On today's episode, we will talk to Cristina Botero and Shikhar Pandey from Commonwealth Edison and Midhat Mafazy from the Interstate Energy Renewable Council about the benefits and challenges of these maps. Both ComEd and IREC have experience working with hosting capacity maps. In ComEd's case, developing and maintaining them, and in IREC's case, drilling down on how to make them as useful and accurate as possible. Here's your host, Atlas Public Policy's Managing Director, Lucy McKenzie.
Good morning and afternoon to our listeners, and welcome to Midhat, Shikhar, and Cristina. I'm thrilled to be with you all to chat about hosting capacity maps, a very wonky but critically important tool for EV charging. So thank you for being with us. So, yeah, let's jump right in. No time to waste on this important topic. Midhat, let's start with you. For those who aren't familiar with hosting capacity maps, can you give us just a high-level summary of what they are and how charging providers and utilities might use them? And while you do that, we'll pop up on screen just as an example, the Southern California Edison map, so folks can get an idea of what these could look like.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. So hosting capacity maps, or HCA maps, or the way they are referred to in California as ICA maps, they're used as planning tools that show how much additional electric load, like EV chargers or generation, like rooftop solar, can be added to a specific location on the grid without triggering any sort of major upgrades. These maps help utilities, developers, and planners quickly assess where there is available capacity and where constraints exist. They sort of work like the Google Maps or GPS for the grid. So instead of showing, let's say, road traffic, they show electric congestion. They are color-coded. Green means capacity is available. Yellow means it's limited, and red means upgrades may be needed. Those colors often map into ranges. So green may be associated with 3 megawatts and above capacity available. Yellow could be 1 to 3 megawatts capacity available, and red could be 1 megawatt or even 0 capacity available. The Southern California Edison map, or SE, we are looking at is a great example. California maps are perhaps some of the most user-friendly and widely referenced. But I should say maybe under the hood, there are still some issues that regarding the quality or consistency that groups like IREC and others are working with the utilities and regulators still to resolve and make the maps even more actionable. And perhaps it's important to clarify that the focus of our discussion is, of course, load HCA. And as such, the type of map that you're looking at is different to generation HCA. A load hosting capacity map focused on new demand like EV charging. These are newer than generation HCA maps, which have been used for years, maybe going back to 2015, to support solar interconnections, and are even integrated into formal review screens. Like in California, there's a screen N, as in Nancy. Load maps are catching up. There's still no clear policy on how to formally use load HCA in load interconnection reviews. So the vision is there, but the full application framework still needs to be built out. It's exciting to have sessions like this that brings us together and discuss this amazing topic.
Great, thank you for that fabulous introduction. So we at Atlas recently published a report on hosting capacity maps in which we spoke to charging developers and utilities, and we heard from both that they're seeing significant cost savings and timeline reductions thanks to these maps. I'm curious to know, both from the IREC and the ComEd perspective, what are you seeing and hearing about the value that these maps can provide? And maybe let's start with Cristina.
Thank you, Lucy. Yeah, we definitely have seen the value right away. For context, in Illinois, we have a goal of getting to 1 million electric vehicles by the year 2030. And as a result, and to support the state goal, we launched new rebate programs to support charging infrastructure and fleet vehicles last year, exactly a year ago. And to date, actually, we've given out over 4,000 ports of rebates, and about 1,500 of that has been to C&I customers that use this map before they decide where they're going to install the charging infrastructure. And it's critical to understand where to site those stations such that the capacity is there, as you point out, reducing the timeline and the cost of the project. So what we've heard is support with siting decisions, accelerating that infrastructure, bring that online fast. But what we've also heard is, money for them. Obviously, time is money for these developers. They want to bring these fast. They want to take advantage of the rebates fast. And the feedback has been positive also in part because we demoed these maps with our customers, with some of our customers before bringing them out. So I think that feedback has been critical. But the other side of the coin has also been for funds coming from the state. So for things like NEVI and so on, all applicants need to submit a utility support form that gives an estimate of capacity in a given location. And so this is also a key tool for those applicants for NEVI and so on to be able to connect with us and quickly get an estimate that gets them through their application.
Fabulous. Yeah, great to hear that. And Midhat, what from IREC perspective, what are you hearing from folks using these maps?
I think we share the same aspect as what Cristina mentioned. What we are seeing from our developers is that more developers are using the maps as a site screening tool, and that's a very big win. They help avoid costly delays and upgrades by identifying potential areas where capacity is available before they submit that application. So even though they are not yet, as I mentioned earlier, they're not yet embedded into the formal screens, they're still saving time and money, and developers still appreciate them. For the different engagement that we work on throughout the country, perhaps I would just say that there's still some other limitations that we hear developers that bring up. And these are mostly shared for both sets of maps, not necessarily just load HCA. It goes the same with generation HCA. That some developers have the desire to have these maps more for like standardize and improve altogether. And one item that also being brought up is that the main utilities still show some form of feeder level results, and sometimes those reflect the lowest capacity node on the feeder, which to some that can be misleading. Perhaps maybe just one bottleneck from a feeder can make a whole feeder look red, even if there is usable capacity nearby. So it's like being told the freeway is jammed because one exit ramp is blocked when the rest of the road is wide open. That's why we continue to advocate, at IREC, to advocate for some form of nodal or section level granularity, which gives the developers precise insights into where interconnection is feasible and where it's not. But generally, we are getting really valuable feedback from these maps so far. Thank you.
Great. So sounds like broad value, but still work to be done. Glad we're all on the right track. So Shikhar, I'm curious to hear from you about ComEd's experience developing a hosting capacity map. And we'll pop yours up on screen here. It uses a similar heat map approach to the SCE one that we showed earlier to show where there's excess capacity on your distribution network. So tell us about what motivated ComEd to develop it.
Well, thanks a lot, Lucy, for the question. Exciting discussion so far. My team is mostly involved in development and maintenance of these maps. But as far as the PV maps goes, we interface quite a lot with the customers, right? And the battery maps. On the EV maps, I think it's Cristina, who talks quite a lot with customers. So, that's where we get our feedback. But initially, when we developed this map, it was probably 2018. right, for the PVs, right? And it looked, we retained the original essence of the map. However, the data that's shown on the map has, substantially changed, and the amount of information, has really been upgraded. And, I do want to point out a phenomenon that's often missed, right? Back in 2018 in Illinois, it was all about that, hey, if I got a land, I'm a developer, I got a land, could I get the capacity or not, right? So the view that you're seeing right now was good enough, right? Because you put a finger on a map, and all you need to know is that can I get the capacity or not, right? Over time, that capacity got saturated, especially in the rural region, right? And I'm talking about the PV maps. That's when we started bringing in the feeder level analysis and whatnot. And fast forward to 2023, Cristina did mention that, hey, we have a goal or aim to get to 1 million EVs, and this was one of our responses to enabling that sort of decision making on customers' part. So we came up with the EV maps. Similar color coding. We don't use on the EV maps the yellow, green, and red in the same sense. Gray is three or above. That was green in what Midhat explained, right? But the idea here is something similar, that, hey, at feeder level capacity, if you zoom in, it looks a heat map right now, but if you zoom in enough, you should be able to see the underlying feeder, their feeder route as well, right? So that's a feature that the map has available. And I think the customers can go ahead and look at their geographic location, their specific address. There is a search bar where you can type in your address. It will zoom into you, and it will show you all the feeders that's available there for folks to connect, right? As far as the feedback goes, before launching this map, we did took it out. We talked to some of key customers around Comet's territory, and some things that we got around was that, okay, showing capacity is good, but some folks would also want to know how many chargers can you install, level 1, level 2, level 3. I don't think we show level 1, but level 2 and level 3. So if you zoom in enough and you click at the feeder, you should be able to see how many chargers on that feeder can you connect, right? It will show you a range. So those are some key insights that we got out from our customers. And it's a process. It's a constant process. You hear from your customers, you go back and you try to implement it, and you add more value to these maps.
Yeah, fabulous. Thank you for all the great work. I know it's a ton of work that goes into the back end of producing these beautiful, simple looking maps that we all get to experience. So what internal changes at ComEd did you need to put in place to get to this point? Were there processes or staffing changes that you had to make? Did you run into any challenges along the way? Are there any lessons learned that you can share with us about the process of getting to this point?
Oh yeah, I mean, we have a huge territory, 11,500 square miles, 5,500 feeders that we have, right? So crunching all the data, making sure that the data is clean at the time that it's produced, right? And the way the data flow works also is something that we have to work through, right? If your economic development and new business knows that a load is coming, how do you reflect that then onto these maps, right? Things of those natures are important. So we have to do quite a lot of cross collaboration when we come up with these maps. At the same time, we have to do this every quarter, right? So drawing these maps up for 5,500 feeders every quarter needs some level of automation, right? You can't manually do it. So skilling up in that area of people can develop these tools and code it internally and whatnot is really, really important. At the same time, when you hear that we need to add another layer of information, right? Now that changes the whole paradigm, and we have to kind of adapt to that as well, right? If tomorrow our customer says that, hey, we need XYZ information on this map, it's really important, we will do it, but that takes a lot of work as well. And then the change management of that, making sure if people leave, that skill is retained and continuity is maintained and level of accuracy is maintained, right? So yes, we have to do that. We have to explain internally to everybody, because my team does the back end of the work. There's another team that actually publishes this work, right? So we have to be in sync with them as well. And we try to do that end of every month, every 3 months, basically. So, meeting that timeline is also very important.
Yeah, lots of work going on. Sounds like it's an iterative process, which we certainly heard from other utilities working on this. Kind of started at one point, got their footing, and felt confident to keep moving forward and making upgrades and being responsive to customer needs, like you mentioned. So, thank you for the incredible amount of work that goes into doing that. So maybe zooming back out again, let's talk about policy as it relates to these maps. So a number of utilities have developed these maps in response to regulatory requirements and state legislation. In Nevada, for example, a state law passed back in 2017 led the Utilities Commission there to direct NV Energy to develop their map. And so let's maybe see if we can get that one up on screen from NV Energy. Midhat, IREC has been involved in a number of regulatory processes compelling utilities to develop these kinds of maps. Tell us, how important is that kind of policy push to this whole process, and how are those regulatory discussions impacting the kinds of data and frequency that utilities are being asked to provide? You mentioned also in California at the start of the show that there's similar conversations going on there.
Yeah, so definitely policy has been a driving force behind HCA map development. In California, New York, and Nevada, regulators required utilities to produce and publish these maps. And that's what got us to this point. Now, I would say maybe we are in phase 2 or maybe even phase 3 in some jurisdictions, where it's about improving usability. So that means requiring maybe more granular data, more frequent updates. Right now, folks are pushing for monthly as considered the ideal, and more transparency around constraints where developers and planners need to know what is the limiting capacity. Is it voltage? Is it thermal or protection constraints? And where and when these limitations occur. I want to highlight something that Nevada is doing or has done that you have on the screen. So NV Energy's map lets users toggle between future years starting in 24. So you can see maybe on the right there, maybe slightly small on your screen. That's a forward-looking feature that's maybe rare in other states, but it goes back to the use cases that our stakeholders are interested with. So with this added feature there that that's provided by NV Energy, it's basically like your GPS is showing you not just current traffic, but where construction zones will be cleared up in the next few months. So that kind of visibility helps developers plan ahead and avoid passing on sites that are about to open up. And in New York, just to touch on that one a little bit, utilities are going a step further by providing even more transparency regarding publishing data and constraint types and other relevant details that is affecting the hosting capacity. Like, is it under voltage? Is it voltage deviation? Is it thermal? And by how much such capacity is limited by those constraints. So that kind of diagnostic insights helps developers site more intelligently and gives users a sense of why capacity is limited, and perhaps also allows utilities to potentially target upgrades more effectively. So I mentioned 3 different states, but a lot of these activities are happening in many other states. I can even mention some of them here.
Yeah, sounds good. Good to know. We'll be following those, continuing to follow those closely here at Atlas. It's a lot of action at any one time on this topic. So now looking to the future, Cristina, I saw recently that the Illinois Commerce Commission approved ComEd's beneficial electrification plan. Are there ways that you're planning to incorporate or improve your map to support that planning, or are there other grid integration solutions that you're working on for EVs as part of that work?
Yes, we're very excited about that approval. We're currently investing about $230 million in our beneficial electrification plan, which is heavily focused on electric transportation and how to transition equitably to EVs. And that approval that you just mentioned allows us to continue investing through the end of 2028. Another 170 million were approved. So we're very excited because we've seen the EV load capacity map to be one of the key instruments that has allowed us to get to where we are. I mentioned some of the statistics of the ports we've incentivized. But one component that we see there's still opportunity is the equity side of things and other additional information layers that we could bring into the map. And that's very community specific. But in Illinois, our beneficial electrification plan, as I said, is heavily focused on how do we ensure that electrification happens equitably amongst our customer base. And so grid considerations and grid capacity is one key factor when you're thinking of siting charging infrastructure, but it's not the only one. So one of the things that we are committing to do as part of this approval is expanding this map to add additional layers that reflect relevant equity factors such that project developers can decide where to site these stations based on these various considerations that are not just grid capacity. It's one important one, but not the only one.
Yeah, great to hear. And for you, Midhat, looking forward, what's your vision for where we go from here on capacity hosting maps? And are there ways for our audience of EV Hub Live to get involved?
Yeah, so I see the future of hosting capacity map as being, smarter, more dynamic, and more transparent, which I mentioned this earlier. And that transformation is already underway, just like what Cristina and Shikhar mentioned with ComEd. But to just go further on this, I think first we need to move away from this sort of feeder level averages and toward the nodal level detail, because the grid isn't one size fits all, and developers need to know what's happening at each specific point. So not just an average across an entire feeder. That kind of precision is what unlocks smarter siting decisions. Second thing I'll maybe highlight is we need maybe much better temporal resolutions. Most folks listening know the grid isn't static. It changes every hour, every season. But many HCA models today rely on just a few time snapshots. So instead, we should be running simulations using maybe 576 time points per year or similar, which gives you hourly profiles across the whole year or 12 months. That gives a much clearer picture of when capacity is actually available, not just if it is. Then third, monthly updates. Grid conditions evolve quickly with new interconnections, load shifting, and utility upgrades. If we don't refresh the maps regularly enough, developers are making decisions based on outdated information, and that slows everyone's downs. And finally, this ties directly into the push for what we call the flexible interconnection. And I know our friends at ComEd are bravely working on dynamic HCA approaches to support this. And we are seeing similar momentum in California that uses the ICA analysis. For example, California uses its ICA data sets, which includes 288-hour analysis to support what they call limited generation profiles, or LGPs, that are 24-value monthly time series or profiles that allow generation customers to match their output to what the grid can actually handle. That same ICA data set could, and maybe frankly should, be used with limited load profiles, or LLP. So that's the load version of the generation for EVs and other new loads. So if a customer can select a load profile that avoids constraints, then they can interconnect faster and without triggering expensive upgrades. It's maybe a practical, maybe a data-driven strategy that could scale quickly. And here's the thing, I guess. It's all happening right now, as I mentioned. The policies and technical standards that govern these HCA maps are being shaped in regulatory proceedings across the country. So whether you're a developer, you're a policymaker, or utility planner, or just someone who wants to see EV charging and DERs or clean energy deployed faster, your voice matters. Join working groups, file comments, attend workshops, help shape the future of these tools. Because ultimately, these maps they are not just visual. They are, as I mentioned earlier, they're the GPS of the clean energy transition. And if the maps or the GPS are fuzzy or outdated or missing key information, we are all risking some key turns that we are taking. So let's get the map right, and so the journey goes on a whole lot smoother for everybody that is taking the journey. Thank you.
I love that framing, GPS of the energy transition. That's fabulous, and certainly sounds slightly less wonky than those of us on the call would get into with this kind of work. So Shikhar, what about for you? What's next on the horizon for your team and the roadmap for your map as you're working through it?
Yeah, I mean, first I would want to start off with like, hey, Midhat, you're really, really prepared in your answer, and I really liked it. I'm going to steal some of those things, GPS of clean energy transition. And I do agree. That's where we need to be moving, right? But I said that this is a journey, right? And I think like there's a balance that utilities, depending upon your customer need and whatnot, you have to strike, you have to listen to them, because there's a whole suite of things that you want to do for a perfect looking map. But it's going to be a journey. And, Lucy asked a question before, what does it take for you to develop these maps, right? And I think that part in conversation often gets missed, right? Because we do assume utilities to get there, right? Like tomorrow, right? That's something that we take for granted, but it is a journey, right? And I think that question, I really appreciate that question, because that kind of highlights how much work it will take, right? At the same time, it will take time, collaboration, ideas from the industry and whatnot. And I think, in my experience in the last 5 years, I feel like we have opened quite a lot as an industry, that we are collaborating on these topics. That is a hard topic to solve, right? Go back to 2015 or whenever, these ideas will be like an alien idea, right? But now we are talking about, updating these things in real time. So, putting all the constraints, right? Right there, people talk about the 8760 values, which is like every hour in the entire year. Right. I think those things are important. And I am pretty sure that, all the utilities, not just us, are eyeing towards that. All I'll say is that it's a journey. We are taking the first steps into like dynamic hosting capacity, right? Going in that direction. We are, rolling out a flexible interconnection program. That is something that, we haven't done before, right? At that scale, but we are taking that step. And all we call for is the collaboration from the industry, the grace that we should be getting on, trying something very bold, right? So we need help along the way. And that was, as we were discussing backroom earlier last month, helping us figure that piece out, right? So we were collaborating with the stakeholders to figure out what are the next steps. So I think that's going to be really, really important in following that GPS to clean energy transition. So.
Yeah, exciting stuff, and certainly plenty of hard work for you and your team. Cristina, one last question for you before we wrap. Midhat mentioned there's a lot of stakeholders involved in this conversation, a lot of folks that might be looking to use this map either in their planning or for their understanding, or just as he mentioned, to try and folks who are just interested in seeing EV charging and distributed generation take off as fast as possible. What is your experience kind of in the outreach around these maps, and how best to get them in folks?
Yeah, thank you for asking. What we're seeing, and also talking a bit about the roadmap for these maps from the customer side, is the utility is perceived by customers as one of the main information sources, if not the main information and education source when it comes to electric vehicles. And so one key question we should be asking ourselves is, what role do we play when it comes to conducting outreach to what specific communities to encourage more transportation electrification? So these maps with grid capacity and with additional layers that we intend to add over time are going to be a key resource, not only for developers, but also for us, such that we can really have targeted outreach to specific communities that we know could benefit the most from transition to electric vehicles. And perhaps that we could also inform our own programs, such that, for example, the rebates that we offered are also different based on the location, allowing these new installations to happen where they benefit the communities the most.
Fabulous. Well, folks, that's all the time we have for today on our EV Hub Live episode. Thank you so much to all of our speakers for joining us to provide their expertise, and to everyone in the audience who attended. If you'd like to watch this episode again or share it with friends or colleagues, you can find it on the Atlas YouTube page, as well as on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. We encourage you to check out EV Hub, and we hope to catch you next time at the next episode of EV Hub Live. Thank you so much. Have a great week, and see you next time. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.